passion, inspiration, determination. Are you ready to jump into a new business idea? Are you ready to jump into a better life? Welcome to our program, Jump Into It. Thank you for joining Jump Into It, a podcast and live show to help entrepreneurial women jump into a better life. Welcome. I'm your host, Gabriella Hellman, CEO of 360 Integral Marketing. I'm an entrepreneur, author, and marketer, and I've had the pleasure of helping over 100 businesses establish themselves and grow successfully. And along with me is my co-host, Anita Booth, an accomplished marketing executive, a two-time author, and spiritual activist. And we have a very exciting guest with us joining us, the multi-talented Lisa Tong. She's a transformative life coach, executive director at Estee Lauder, and a YouTube sensation, the Chinese Soup Lady, with thousands of subscribers on the YouTube channel. Now, she'll be sharing with us how to be our authentic self. And that is a question that many of us ask. How do you be authentic as a woman? How do you be authentic as an entrepreneur to lead a more fulfilled life? So before we jump into it, if you have any questions, please leave them in the chat and we'll get them answered before the end of the show. So Anita, as a senior marketer, an author, a spiritual activist, what are your thoughts around being your authentic self?
Thank you so much, Gabriella, and hello to all of our audience, and glad to be with you again this week. And this topic is one topic that we've actually heard a lot about in the last few weeks. We've had 3 guests, and in each interview we've had previously, that word has definitely come up, being your authentic self. And, you know, I thought, what does that mean? Just to level set before we bring the lovely Lisa Tong in, because she is a transformation coach and she will certainly have a viewpoint about what being authentic in your work life and in your home life means. But really, when it comes down to it, simply put, being authentic means that you're being true to your personality, your values, and your spirit. And regardless of the pressure that you're under, that you maintain that authenticity. And sometimes early in your career, I can recall that being authentic is not always as easy as that sounds, because sometimes we have to go with the flow of the workflow. And sometimes being authentic is not necessarily what they want to see from you. And that is an interesting perspective as to why do we have to change ourselves in certain environments? And so when we talk about being authentic, it's really about how much can we truly be ourselves. So on that note, I'm really excited to invite Lisa Tong in. I know you're going to say a few more words, Gabriella, to bring her in, but we will certainly appreciate hearing more from Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Anita. Yes, it's a big topic, and thank you for your insights, Anita. So let's have our special guest, Lisa Tong. Hello there, how are you? And join in our conversation. So Lisa, you've played many roles. You have many roles in your life. You are an executive, you're a transformative coach, which I hope we can learn more about, and a growing YouTube sensation. Can you speak to our audience what it means to be your authentic self?
Great question, actually. And it's very similar to what Anita said around, so I want to start off with how you said it is to be authentic, right? To be is a state, right? It's not something you do. It's not something that you say. It's actually a way of being, right? And that's what to be authentic actually means. And so it's actually in thoughts, right? Down to values, right? Which drive the thoughts. And then the thoughts turn into action or words. And it's actually even what you don't do, right? We always talk about we're paying attention to what we're doing, what we're saying, but what about what you're not doing or what you're not saying? Actually, that has equal weight in authenticity, right? And so both sides of the coin are equal in that respect. And so it's actually paying attention to what am I leaning into? What am I not leaning into to be authentic with what I feel? And again, yeah, it's you as a whole person, right? And it's not just what you do, right? What you say, but it's you as a whole person. That's what being authentic is. And again, everyone has a different gauge of their authenticity. I can't say, Gabrielle, that your authenticity looks like this, or Anita, yours looks like this, right? You will know what your authenticity is, and no one else can judge it.
So that's a good question. How will you know that you are being authentic versus being something that to please somebody else? To play the role that's expected of you, right? Because they are not always the same.
Agree. And so my gauge, and this is my personal opinion, and I do see it in others as well in the case studies that I have, is when you're not being authentic. So I'm going to use the reverse first, is you're actually using resources to create that. And what it does is actually taxes you. It actually drains your energy. That's because what you need to do is actually create kind of something to block what your authenticity is and how it wants to show up, and change it to show up a certain way. And
can you give us an example, like even in your personal life, how that?
So when you feel like you're out of alignment, let's say when you're, let's say you want to go with, there's a meeting, everyone's got, we're going to maybe something around, we're going to make this decision, but you're not comfortable with it, right? What you're doing is you'll feel the discomfort, but what you'll do is you'll need energy, resources within yourself to withhold what you want to say and actually react to create a different persona that comes out. That in itself, that work to translate what's authentic, block, change, takes energy. And we don't realize it, but if you're constantly authentic, let's say in work environment, by the end of the day, you will feel tired. You will feel drained, right? And there are moments where you're like, God, that was a hard day. Yeah, because the whole day you've been inauthentic. Yeah, you've been working, but you've also been inauthentic in a way that, is it work that you love? Right? If it was work that you love and energized you, it would create energy. It would give energy. But if it's work that's not connecting with you, it's not exciting you, that's going to drain the energy. So I think energy measurement is a really great pulse on, am I showing up authentically? At the end of the day, can you say, gosh, I'm so energized today. I'm so grateful because I showed up authentically and everything would sing. Right? That's kind of
I almost see it as two things. One is you may not be in the right job. And then how do you show up in whatever job that's handed to you?
Yeah.
Right?
Does that mean, I'm jumping in now that you said that, because it was really, it kind of turned a light bulb on with respect to authenticity and purpose. Because what I heard you say is, if you are in a role, and we're talking about roles, and whether that's corporate roles or entrepreneurial roles, if you're not living your true purpose, does that suggest you are blocking your authenticity? And then that would even, make it a bit more complicated, because, when you're younger, I think you're learning about yourself and maybe don't know how, maybe you're not quite clear on who you are from a value standpoint, and maybe you don't know yourself as well, right? You're young, you're just, you're getting into these types of, workplaces and opportunities. Is that, did I hear that correctly, Lisa? So you are saying authenticity and purpose could be one and the same.
What's your feel on that, Anita? Just based on your own experience up to this point.
Well, it sounds right? Like when you attached energy to it, which I obviously love talking all things energy and matter, and that resonates with me. It's that hey, if you're in a good flow of being authentic, you know, things go easier for you in the day, versus by the end of the day, you're like, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you know this, right? It's because, so what I'm going to do is just validating what you already actually know, right? And actually what we're talking about right now is this transformative thinking, right? Because you know this, and now it's like, yes, I'm thinking about how I'm thinking now. And that's what we're doing together, essentially. And so absolutely, it's, you know, you grew up and your parents like, okay, you need to be, okay, in my case, you know, doctor, accountant, engineer, very pretty standard. But when you get into it, you know what, you're like, that's not really what I want to do. And eventually it does burn you out. You do get tired. You have different expectations, right? That's already a clear sign that you're not authentic to what you want to do, connected to passion. And that's why it is draining. It's tiring. Albeit your priorities at the time might be like, all right, I, you know, want the title, I want the money, right? That's a higher priority. That's a higher excitement. That's what keeps you going until you get to a point where you're like, the authenticity actually starts to break over those values and those needs, right? And it's so strong to a point where you're like, it's not about the money. It's not about the title, right? And that's where you'll start tipping and the energy shifts. You will actually definitely notice.
Because I'm like, because maybe my interpretation of being authentic is coming to the table and being
That
who you
too.
are, right?
Yep.
And I'm not always in a role that is ideal situation where it's feeding all of my needs. It's feeding my sense of purpose. It's feeding, you know, all of the things that I want it to be so that I can show up being authentic. Because there's a lot of times we have so many stressors and may not feel that we're aligned with our purpose because we have to deal with these stressors.
Yes.
I still, and maybe correct me, I still think we need to be authentic even when we're out of sync with our purpose.
Agree. So a good example would be if you're, let's say, in makeup sales, right? And you want to push a certain product to a client who doesn't really want it. It's not her shade. Let's say the shade's not in stock, but you're like, but this shade is perfect for you. And you're feeling like, oh, I'm feeling a little inauthentic about this, but that's what's it takes energy for you to actually come out and think about it in a different lens and say, I'm going to sell this to her anyway, because I want to meet the sales, right? I don't care about her as a person. I just want to meet the sales. But if you do that over and over and over time, it will eventually eat at your value, right? It'll be top of mind, right? And so the whole idea is that every day, what you said, Gabrielle, about just even showing up, those cases exist. Those examples exist. The bigger one is, yes, the role, but yeah, it's daily, right? That you'll find this in everyday interactions.
Right. So this is like, how did you get there? So we're like, you're saying that, you know, as a child, your parents had a lot of, yet you were exposed to a lot of pressures. Oh, I want you to be an engineer or you're a doctor, or whatever, lawyer, but, you know, and you're a transformative coach, you're a soup, you know, you do YouTube, you're doing a lot of things that probably your parents couldn't even imagine that these were things that, you know, roles that they wanted their daughter to go into. So how did you find your authenticity? Like what journey did you take to get to do these really cool projects that you're doing now?
And so what I think the interesting thing that you brought to the table earlier, you mentioned to me about, all right, be authentic in that I still work full-time, right? That is the interesting thing about being an entrepreneur that's yet still employed, right? And I know I've got friends and investors that say, oh, you have to quit in order to commit to, you know, a business on your own, right? That's what it means to commit. And yet I still challenge that really as status quo. It's like, why can't we do both, right? And you have to recognize that some instances you can't. Some people don't want to, right? They don't have the capacity or they still want to do both. So for me, it was really like, I don't feel that. So trained as an engineer, didn't like it, and I knew this, right? Come into corporate, fine. It's good, it works, it pays the bills. But there's more, right? And so because I'm risk adverse, I'm like, let's do these as hobbies. And that's me following that authenticity trail about I'm just going to dabble for the meantime. And it's pretty low risk. I'll bootstrap everything myself. And the idea is that my job can fund these hobbies, right? So they're hobbies, they're not businesses. And eventually you get to a point where you're like, hey, I could scale this to something. And that's it. And so that's what I do encourage people that, especially in today's world where we're bound by certain ways of living, like, you know, we need to make a living, we need to pay the bills, feed the kids, pay the mortgage, right? What can you still be true to in small ways, right? and don't think end picture. A lot of us are like, no, I want to be a YouTuber and it's going to look like this. But you have to start even smaller. What'll excite you for the next 3 months? Start small, right? And so that's what I encourage people to not break free of corporate, but take on a little more space and bandwidth. Say, how much do I want to commit to be authentic around something else, right? Yeah.
Your
I
employee,
love that definition though. That resonates a lot again with me. I'm in corporate too, and I love that. Gabrielle and I go way back, and she was in corporate, and then she was courageous enough, 10 years ago, and said, oh, this is, she put a stake in the in the sand, saying, this is what I need, this is what I want. She dreamed about it, and then put a lot of resource around educating herself on opening up a business. And I think that that's fantastic. And some people really go in, like you said, you can go in and make that decision. And I've heard people say that before, Lisa. Oh, well, if you don't commit, if you don't fully commit, like, how do you expect that it's gonna go anywhere? And sometimes I think when I do all these little projects, I'm like, well, why does it have to always go somewhere? I mean, you want it to go somewhere, but when the way they're saying it is, you're not going to make money, or you're not going to get as many followers, or you're not going to put as many resources against it. And I too would push back to say, well, to start something you love. I mean, for example, even this podcast we're doing, right? We had a fantastic idea. We want to support women entrepreneurs. We help women entrepreneurs grow their brand and their business every day. That's our backgrounds for us. But, we didn't go into it thinking, okay, let's set it up that, a year from now. It's small goals, small planning. And we bit by bit, we get there and we feel happy about it. And I think that makes you feel authentic, because you're taking the steps, not necessarily in, these big ways that are equally as important. Gabriella with her decision to do that is a great one. And so I think to your point, we have to recognize everybody has a different way they might go about, introducing their authenticity in their entrepreneurship, right? And, whether it's you're a big entrepreneur, big business entrepreneur, you started and then now you've got this multi-million-dollar business going, or you're an entrepreneur like yourself that, you have a lot of little things and a lot of little, and they call that the side gig economy now, right? Like a lot of little gigs to, to fulfill your life. And
absolutely.
I think it's about time. Why I was, I would have loved that 20 years ago. Is small, all these extra little small gigs, right? That wasn't a big thing back then, but I do feel like we're transitioning more into that.
Now, your bosses aren't here. So can you answer, or when you go, to your 9-to-5 corporate job, are you being authentic?
Okay, great example. Actually, I did think of this.
Great question.
So what I have chosen to be authentic in this is I've actually declined promotions, and I've requested that I not have a team anymore. Right. And so it's interesting, at a point in my career where I said, I don't want that job, right? I don't want a team. And essentially what happened was at my next review for my yearly review, I said it, right? I said, I don't want a team anymore. I don't want certain promotions. I only want roles like this. I don't want roles in operations. Right. And that was me being authentic corporately. And of course, that's not normal, right? Because a lot of people are like, yeah, you should take the promotion. Yeah, you should. Right. But there was a point, maybe about 5 years ago, or maybe a little more. I was just like, don't give me that promotion. I don't want it. I don't want a team. And we took a different path, and I've become an individual contributor for very specific projects and roles. And that's how I show up for the company. Right. And it works.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah. I wasn't expecting that answer, but
Like you walk the talk.
But it's so against the grain. Like when I tell people this, people are like, oh yeah, the promotion, and like, why aren't you, especially if you've been, working for so many years. Yeah, but I don't want it, right? And that's saying I'm going to give this up because it's not me. I don't want to do that, right? Yeah,
but that's a risk too, right? Because you are, the corporations reward that sense of loyalty, that sense of being a team, that sense of striving to go there, and you're holding back and go, no, I'm trading off my authenticity. I need to preserve it, and this is the way I'm going to preserve it.
Yeah, but the company's been fantastic. I mean, they do listen, and they did, try to insert me in roles that and I did actually decline certain roles. I'm like, no, I don't want that, right? And so, but it was a partnership, right, at the very end. And I think that's what being authentic, like with two people, it's a relationship, right? The authenticity of that relationship is between the two people, right? And so that's what you need to make it work, right? And so
that's a good point, because not always you could be in the workplace, back to that point, right? You're doing your job. And I always remember too, there was, some people that, pretty much got the authentic Anita, but, I would be joking and but certain, whether it's the bosses or the, the senior execs, you put a different persona on. And that's, again, goes back to, now you change who, you walk into a meeting, maybe the glasses go on, maybe you're not as talkative. I mean, if everybody knows me, I'm talkative. So, if you're sitting there quiet and you're only putting yourself out there because you've been asked, as opposed to having natural conversation and sharing your ideas without, I think the biggest problem or barrier to being authentic is the notion that you're going to be judged. And yes, I think nobody likes to be judged, and unfortunately we're always judging, and judging can happen and I'm sure you agree, in a variety of spectrums. It could be something simple, or it could be something even bigger. So it's just interesting that you can even change between people, right? These three people at work, they get the real me. Those two people, they get the different, so every day you're a chameleon on, ensuring that you're trying to be authentic, but you're worried to be judged. And I think that's probably the state.
And that's what takes, sorry, go ahead, Gabrielle.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that if you pretend you're somebody else and they reject you, they didn't reject you. They rejected that other person, right? Yeah. So that's how you safeguard yourself, but you're really cheating yourself at the end, because they don't get to know you and you don't get to show up to be you.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of energy. This is what I go back to, the energy statement, right? Like, it takes so much energy to be inauthentic, right? And we don't realize it, but that's what tires you out. That's what drains your energy. And is that how you want to use your own personal resources? At the end of the day, that's the true question, right?
Yeah, because our resources is our life, right? That's our life.
And it's within us, right? And so if you're using these resources to show up this way differently for work, how is that going to translate to the energy source that you have to show up for your family when you get home? Question, right? Something to think about.
No, I like that. And so in your journey, and you have yet to really just tell us how you sort of went from corporate, like, to maybe expand upon how you went from your corporate and then you went into these other entrepreneurial projects. Can you share a little bit about that? Like, was it an aha one day that you were at work and you're like, I don't like this anymore?
No, don't get me wrong. I actually really do love my job. I actually do love my corporate work, right? Because I selectively asked for that type of work. That's the first piece about being authentic in a corporate environment, right? I was bold enough to say, you know what, if I'm going to stay corporate, I want to be doing this, right? And so that's the first thing. But the second thing was, actually, everything started out as a hobby, right? It's just like, oh, I'm going to make a soup. I'm going to post it. Why not, right? I'm cooking tonight anyway. And so I had zero expectations. I think this is the great thing about passion, right? Is that the expectation is not to make money. It's to share it, right? And so when you don't have that expectation tied to what you're doing, you can just do whatever you want. Whatever energy flows, let it flow naturally. It excites you, do it, right? And so everything actually started as a hobby. The coaching was like, I'm curious about coach training when I took a course, right? And then that kind of built. Same with the soup, right? And so everything started out as a hobby, and then and because I was authentic, I was sharing it. I found people who loved the same space. Then we grew with each other. And then as you snowball and grow, then you're like, it's got legs. Then you can think about how to stand it on its legs, right? But because I'm in corporate, I do have that safety net, you could say, that I just use corporate to fund my hobbies. That's how it started. Yeah. Zero expectations.
And then then the flip side of that is then you can't disappoint yourself, right?
But I love it, right? Like there's no disappointment, right? But I'm doing what I love. That's it, right?
So amazing. So amazing.
So
that's
how much
authenticity though, right? Because you're showing up with something that's genuine to you. You don't care how many people you have or who you're touching, or right? It doesn't matter.
Well, it's always rewarding when people do watch, though.
I agree.
Right? I mean, maybe it's a secondary reward for you, but it kind of affirms, because if you were going to go out with a product, and you're so passionate about it, like Dragon's Den, right? Oh, I sold my house, I sold my farm, I sold my RSPs, and I produced this product, and I'm so passionate, I love about it. And the guy's like, nobody's gonna buy that. So I think that there's got to be a link between what you're passionate about, the purpose, and that there's a need for it, because nothing's gonna drain your energy more than finding that that there's no meaning behind that purpose or that intent or that exercise. You are an island on your own.
I agree. So to that point, I think I would even venture to say we'll reel it back. Like, if I was working in a space with them and transfer, I'd be like, all right, but it's the product's not the end state. There's something else. You want to create something. What's the value piece that you want to create and offer your client, your customer, right? That's the piece that probably needs refinement, thinking through. The product is just something as a result to bring that to life. But there's something else there before that, is they want to give and create something for their customer, right? It could be freedom. It could be an easier way to do something, right? I don't know what that is. So to your point, Gabriel, absolutely. Like, even before you commit to a product or service, you'd have to refine your passion. That piece is, what's the value proposition, right? Like, not as a product or service, but something else. There's something else there. I think that's a mid-step, but you're totally right about, like, don't go there right away, right? Because the resource commitment is quite heavy.
Yeah, the resource. And you need to bring in people. You need to bring in a community of people that are going to actually buy your product. So I'm going back to, speaking as an entrepreneur, is that I may be very passionate about something, but, I may love singing, but I have a horrible voice. But you know what? If I was singing all day long and I was like having a great, nobody's going to listen to this.
Wait. I would actually challenge that, really. Right? Why not? Why could you just be a horrible singer, but still there? I will tell you, there will be people who love you still, right? Like, you could weave in other things, right? Like, it could be comedic. It could be, I don't know, but I'm just saying, right? Traditional thinking would say, singers, if you want to be a singer, you have to be good at it. Really? I don't know. That's why I want to pause and challenge a lot of the status quo and the frame of mind thinking that we actually have coming out. I do this with my kids. I'm like, what makes this true, right? Why do you have to be? And singing is a perfect one. But you off tune, off key could be like children's. Like, think about it, how you do it. It could be for kids. They would love that.
Why do you love singing and you hate kids? But anyway, the idea,
I think we're digressing.
Right? But it's like, I do believe that if you you have to marry all of them together.
Agree.
You have to find that overlap, that magic.
Yes.
That's where it's going to overlap, where there's a need in society for who you are. If you know, we all bring to the table special skills, special talents that we're unique.
For sure.
That, you know, and when we're authentic, that's when they really shine.
Agree.
But we also have to figure out how do we massage that, or maybe manipulation, not, but groom them so that they really can service where society is today, or where, you know, where we can have the biggest impact and making the most positive change.
Agree.
And I think, you know, do what you love and the money will follow. I think that, you know, as a business person, I always have to look at the numbers too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I know. No, but what are like, that's part of it too. Like, you have to think, okay, what's the business case for this? I'm passionate about it. I love it. I want to do it. Then you do the reality check here. I can be authentic with it, but the reality check is, do the numbers support it, or they don't?
I agree.
And if they don't, then you go back and you retweak it, but it doesn't mean that you have to lose your authenticity. You just have to figure out how you need to grow in order to hit the target.
Yeah.
I also think too, based on Lisa's example, or Lisa's, you know, multi-layered, if you will, entrepreneurial skill set, and the fact that, you know, again, it's not everybody has that corporate job and has the hobbies. I think hobby entrepreneur is a great way to get into, is something that you're passionate about. And then there's the other side of it, which is, you know, though the entrepreneur that is really coming out with something that, you know, requires investment and, you know, funding and all those a bit more complicated business structures. And so I do think there's sort of two prongs, because they would certainly, an entrepreneur in that matter, like Gabriella did when she was ready, was, you know, looked up, finding, you know, maybe government support, finding out ways, you know, getting her plan in order, and being a bit more structured with the business plan, because, you know, sometimes that doesn't come, you know, as you grow. Maybe one of your, you know, your businesses, whether it's a transformation coach or your soup business, you might get to a point where you're like, okay, now it's getting to a point where I have to create the plan to grow it, right? The, you know, infrastructure may be needed. Maybe you need some staff. And so I do think, you know, being a smaller hobby entrepreneur is amazing way to be authentic to yourself, and to not take too large of a step that, you know, would be too overwhelming. And then, you know, like, as I said, for those other entrepreneurs that are, you know, in a little bit more later stage, or, you know, bigger stage with the concept that they're bringing it out in masses, or it's you know, a software, you know, software platforms, those types of things, you know, yes, you could probably code and do something on the side, but the minute that you're ready to bring it to market, then, you know, then you need your marketing plan and your, you know, your product plan and all your 5 Ps. So, so I do think that, you know, and this is what's great about, I think, bringing people like yourself on this show, Lisa, is because we want to showcase that there's many types of ways to become an entrepreneur, right? And it doesn't have to look as black and white, or, you know, it has to be so structured like we once thought when, you know, we were maybe younger growing up. Oh, you can't do that because you're doing this. And now it's like, no, you can do that and this, and be your whole self, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And
so I have a question. That where in 5 years, do you see yourself still with these 2 hobby career jobs and your corporate, or what is your ultimate vision or goal? Like, if, let's just say that money was not an issue, Lisa, okay? You don't have to do the corporate job and kind of, you know, manipulate through all that. I want to cherry pick which projects I want. You could go full blast. with the, you know, the Chinese soup lady or life coach, what would you like if money is not an issue? Because that's always that question. Well, if money's not an issue, what would you really do?
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna be really honest, and it might sound like I'm not authentic in it. Actually, I enjoy my corporate role because of what I'm doing. So what I do is I actually do transformative thinking in the roles in corporate, which makes it fascinating because I've kind of blended the two. And my corporate job is my test bed, right? I do a lot of test cases, testing out theories with that environment. And so, and there's a lot of them, right? And so part of this right now is that there's this unity between transformative coaching in a corporate environment, and it works for me. And so even if money was an issue, I might still be in corporate for a little bit longer.
Okay, but your end goal is not to stay there.
Probably not. I would probably end up doing something on my own, whether it's soup, which I'm exploring, whether it's transformation coaching, which I'm exploring too. One of those, or maybe something else. Honestly,
I was just about to say, or maybe something else, because
exactly.
you know what, 5 years from now, you know, that's a long time. And sometimes we think about these 5-year goals, you know, and I know businesses typically plan, you know, 3 to 5 years out, and there's reasons, you know, to do that, especially as you're growing and you become a bigger business. But I think, you know, I think you hit it on the nails. Like right now, these things are good for you maybe another 5 or 10 years, right? Like, you know, you could take both jobs because you've structured in a way to make it work for you. I think if you were in another corporate role that wasn't as great as maybe the organization you're with, right? You happen to have a great organization who supports you, probably knows that you do these other things, and those types of employers are the best, right? That, you know, they're supportive of their employees, and they understand that, you know, there's more to their life than that, you know, 9 to 5. But I don't think every organization is like that. And so if you were somewhere else that was, you know, stifling you, and, you know, I think you'd be thinking differently, right? Again, oh, it's not about the money. You'd get yourself into another role that met your needs. So you happen to be there. But for anybody else out there listening and that is thinking that for themselves, like, oh, I got this terrible job, but I really want to do that, I still think you take the baby steps to do your passion, and you also take the steps to get out of the role that's not making you happy, because then it's you go back to it's sucking the life out of you, and then you don't have the energy to do your wonderful side projects that you love to do. So it's certainly, I think, you know, like a balance, right? Always.
Yeah. And I keep, you know, for the people listening, keep in mind, I've been working for 20 plus years, right? I didn't get to this point like when I graduated. It probably took a good iterations of learning about myself, learning my authenticity, finding my voice. What can I put up with? What can I stand? How, right? It took many iterations for me to get to where I am at this point in my career. So it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen right from graduation, right? It is an evolution journey for you to find a certain authenticity power in corporate, right? Because Anita, you talked about, well, corporate's a lot harder because you're working within the structure, of course, right? So to get to a point where you know how to operate in corporate does take learning. And people absolutely, and maturity, right? There's a growth there. And you might know it in theory, but it's not the same to just show up and do it. It's very different. And so it doesn't happen overnight, but be intentional that you want to get there, right? That you want to grow, you want to learn, you want to bring out that authenticity, your true voice, right?
So just as we're wrapping up here, what advice, because our audience is more entrepreneurial than corporate. So some of them may have the luxury of having a corporate job. And I know that with all the downsizing and that, there's less and less corporate, like cushiony, nice corporate jobs out there, that more and more people are almost forced into becoming an entrepreneur in order to, because of those limited opportunities. So they don't get that testing ground of doing the different hobbies to figure out, to fulfill that exercise, that other dimension of themselves that they're not getting in the corporate world. But if just from wearing the entrepreneurial hat as a woman, what would be some of the advice that you would give to our audience and to women that are listening to be authentic, or ways that you can be authentic, your authentic self as a woman and as an entrepreneur?
So the first one that I'll offer is to hold certain boundaries too, right? To set up some boundaries for yourself in where you're going to spend your energy. We only have a limited pool of energy. And so be choiceful that this means more allowing me to be authentic. I'm going to put my energy here, right? We all have choice in where we can invest. And so just having a lens on what your options are and where you're going to commit some of that energy very clearly, and say, I'm going to set up this ring fences. I want to do this. Tell people, right? Like your partner, if they're not supportive, let's say necessarily, and saying, well, I'm not sure if you want to do it. We'll say, this means it's important to me. This is how I want to show up. And I'm going to spend this amount of energy and time here, right? And it's just being very clear to your relationships, because you want to show up authentically in that part too. And just say, this is what I want to do, and here's why. And that's finding your voice, right? So that's the first thing I think for me is with work. I ring fenced it very authentically. My partner, I told him, I'm going to train for an Ironman. It's going to be 20 hours a week. This is for me. This is how I want to show up. How we're going to make this work. That's the other, right? And so authenticity doesn't only show up at a work environment, right? It could be wellness, recovery, children, right? Your parents, hobbies, anything is where you invest your energy authentically. That's the first thing.
And what's the second?
Okay, well, the second thing is follow genuinely the thing that excites you the most, not what other people say that should excite you, right? Or that you see someone else, like, fine, other YouTuber has 10,000 followers, let's say, and you're like, I want to have 10,000 followers. That's not the excitement. I'm sorry. Having 10,000 followers is not the exciting piece in you, right? That's a metric. So we're always trying to follow metrics, right? And they publish this a lot, like, oh, this business, grew 1,000%. They have this many followers. They, round A funding, they were able to get this much money. Forget all that, right? You have to at least be authentic to, like, why am I doing it? And then put a metric behind it afterwards. But that comes second, right? The output, the metric is second. First is you, right? And so I think sometimes we have it backwards.
Yeah. I know we're wrapping up here, but I think that some people don't know what that is, right? So, like, that's a journey just to figure out what that is, that's going to ignite me, that's going to get me excited, and not because my family's going to love me,
yes,
or what I'm doing. It's true inner motivation and desire, as opposed to something that's been planted in my mind.
I think everyone has it. It just might be covered by layers and layers of societal expectations of parental, right? We all have it.
But how do you get to it? I think that's the real question, is how do you lift up the layers and say, well, that was your stuff, that's not my stuff.
Exactly. Return to sender.
Yeah, but you gotta figure out that was their stuff that they sent to you.
Agreed. I know, but that's a process, right? But take that mantra, right? Return everything to senders.
Return to sender. I love it. Return to sender. Okay.
What you've said, this has by far been my favorite conversation, because I feel that it is really so prominent. This question, and somebody did ask it, our audience, do you think that the authenticity word is overused? And so before we wrap up, what do you think about that? Do you think it's important and it should be overused, because being authentic is important, right?
Well, I think it's overused in a way that it's a buzzword now. At the very end, though, it'll land with the people it lands with, right? The question is not, is it overused necessarily? The question is it hitting the people that need it, right? And if it means something to you, you will think it's not overused. right? But if it doesn't mean anything to you, or you think it's just wishy-washy, then you will think it's overused, right? And so I think it doesn't matter. You use it because you're authentic with using it, and it'll land with the people who need it.
Fantastic. That's great. All right. So if anybody wants to find out about you through YouTube or through your transformative coaching, is there any way that they can contact you, or any?
I mean, I'm usually not very good with publicizing anything. But I mean, the ChineseSoupLady.com, any of the handles around that is a place where you can find a part of me. So you can definitely go there and message me, and I will reply to anything. So just do that. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay, so our next show will have another fabulous guest whose journey is sure to inspire you. To learn more, to join our Jump Into Facebook page, first of all, I want to say before I get into the ending is thank you so much, Lisa, thank you so much for really, it was really, I think it was a very rich conversation, and we really unpeeled the layers of what authenticity is and the different roles that we play in it. So, and how to preserve it, and how to define it, how to find it within us, and how to preserve it. So I think, you covered a lot of the stuff. So thumbs up on that. So going back to just saying, join us for our next podcast. You can find us on Jump Into Facebook page, Instagram, so subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also listen to us on Jump Into It podcast on your favorite platform. We are on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple TV, to name a few. With the courage and knowledge to bring your ideas to life, be ready to jump into it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you to our audience.
Absolutely.